We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 27b. On the previous Amud, the Brisa brought the pasuk of O Lahetiv, the extra word O, in order to teach Hatavas Acherim, that is Chayiv by Shvuah. And the Gemara had asked, why is the word O an extra word in the pasuk? Don't we need it to say that it's either or, either a Shvuah Lahara or a Shevuah Lahetiv is liable? So the pasuk O, the word O in the pasuk rather, is not extra at all. And so the Gemara said, actually, the word O in the pasuk is extra, because according to Rabbi Yonasan, we're in the middle of a brisa bringing the sheet of Rabbi Yonasan. According to Rabbi Yonasan, automatically we understand that a pasuk means either or. Unless the pasuk says yachtav, meaning together, then we assume it's both together. But otherwise, we automatically understand that. And so the word O is extra. Rabbi Yoshia on the brisa on the previous summer was brought, disagrees with Rabbi Yonasan. So according to Rabbi Yoshia, the pasuk O is not extra. And so therefore, how do we understand the brisa according to Rabbi Yoshia? And the Gemara says, Afilu Tamer Rabbi Yoshia, you could even say the brisa is Rabbi Yoshia. V'savar lok Rabbi Akiva, you could say that he holds like Rabbi Akiva, the dorish ribuye umeyute, because Rabbi Akiva, he darshans the pasuk when it's talking about Shavuot, when it's talking about Shavuos Bito, he darshans it, as we said earlier, as inclusions and exclusions. And when you darshan it in that fashion, it only actually excludes one case, and the most logical case to exclude would be a situation of mitzvah. And so therefore we say as follows, if you're going to say correctly that the pasuk is talking about davar harashus, it's talking about something that's not a mitzvah, dvar mitzvah. So then you can say that we're excluding something that is a mitzvah in this riboy miut riboy. But if you say that the pasuk is talking about mitzvahs, there'd be nothing to exclude. And Rashi explains, Umeshani, and the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yoshia delo miyaser le-o. According to Rabbi Yoshia, where the word O is not extra, nafka le dekroy lav b'mitzvah ayri, he understands that the pasuk is not talking about mitzvah, because that's the main theme of that brisa. He learns that the pasuk is not talking about mitzvah. Why? The savar lok Rabbi Akiva, because he holds like Rabbi Akiva, the dorish ribuye umiyute, who darshans the pasuk in the form of ribuy and miut, inclusion and exclusion, and my miyet. Now, what are you going to exclude? There's only one thing to exclude. There's nothing more fit to exclude than taking an oath to nullify a mitzvah. If it would be chayiv by nullifying a mitzvah, kol shekain kol shar Shavuos, certainly all other Shavuos would be liable, so that is the one to exclude from liability. Elavadai bittul mitzvah imit, rather it has to be that nullification of a mitzvah is excluded. V'kiyam mitzvah mimit midalese b'lavahin, and then the fulfillment of a mitzvah, that's also excluded, because you can't have it if it doesn't work in the negative, it cannot work in the positive as well. And so essentially what the Gemara is answering over here is that one can say the brisa follows Rabbi Yoshia, and it's not that we're learning out from the word O, and the word O is extra. According to Rabbi Yoshia, the word O is not extra, but the brisa fundamentally can still follow Rabbi Yoshia, because it could be the brisa is following Rabbi Akiva, that in general the context of the pasuk is not talking about mitzvah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, Ma'im harashus v'chulu. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira made an argument that even a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah should be considered a shvuah. And the response of the Rabbanan was, well, if the nullification of a mitzvah, if that kind of shvuah is no good, so therefore that means the negative is no good, the positive should be no good as well. And the Gemara says, Rabbanan shaperka amri le'lu Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The Rabbanan are making a good argument against Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. For Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Amar lach, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira will say to you, Atu hatavas acherim, we can say the same thing by hatavas acherim, doing good to others. Lav afagav delese bechlal haras acherim, even though you can't have the negative, there would be no shvuah to do bad to others, because that would be an aveira. For Rabbi Rachman, and still the pasuk includes hatavas acherim. So hachanami bekiya mitzvah, can't we say the same thing by fulfillment of a mitzvah? Afagav delese bebitul mitzvah, even though it's impossible to have a shvuah that nullifies a mitzvah, Rabbi Rachman, still the pasuk includes the fulfillment of a mitzvah. But the Gemara says, V'Rabbanan, now the Rabbanan respond to that, Hasam isei below eitiv. It's not true. When it comes to hatavas acherim, you could have the reverse. Let's say you don't do good. It's not that you're doing bad, you're not harming anyone, but you're simply taking an oath not to do good. But over here, when it comes to mitzvah, you can't even have that. Mi isei below akayim. Can a person say that I'm not going to fulfill a mitzvah? That also would not be a good shvuah. And so therefore, that's why specifically when it comes to mitzvah, the Rabbanan are making this argument. And again, you can't say the same thing when it comes to rishus. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Shvuah shelo ochal kikar zu. Let's say a person takes a shvuah that he's not going to eat this loaf. Then he repeats it and says, Shvuah shelo achalna, takes a shvuah, I'm not going to eat it. And then a third time, Shvuah shelo achalna, a third time he says a shvuah, an oath, I'm not going to eat it. V'yochla, and he eats it, eino chayev ela achas. He's only going to be liable to one. Zuhi shvuas bitoy, and this is an example of a shvuas bitoy, a shvuah, again, that's a verbal shvuah. Shechayoven al zedona makos ve'al shegegasa carbon olav yored. That again, the person, if he does it on purpose, he's going to get malchus, and if by mistake he violates, so then he's going to bring the carbon olav yored. Again, that's the variable carbon, the sliding scale carbon, that it depends on how wealthy the person is in terms of what he brings as a carbon, whether it be an animal or a bird or a carbon mincha. And the Mishnah continues, Shvuas shav, chayavin al zedona makos val shigagasa pater. When it comes to a Shvuas shav, a shvuah that is in vain, so for that, if it's done on purpose, then there will be malchus, but if it's done by mistake, the person actually is exempt. And the Gemara says, Lambali lemisni shvuah shelo ochel, shvuah shelo ochalna. Why does it need to say the shvuah that he didn't? First he says Shvuah shelo ochel, and again that was Shvuah shelo ochel kikar zu, and then Shvuah shelo ochalna. And the Gemara explains how Kamash Malan it's teaching as follows: Taima de Amar shelo ochel v'hadar Amar shelo ochalna to lo machayev el achada. It's specifically in this order because he first said shelo ochel and then he said shelo ochalna. That's why he's only liable to one. Avol Amar shelo ochalna, but let's say he first said shelo ochalna, v'hadar Amar shelo ochel, and then he said shelo ochel, machayev tarti. Actually, he would be liable to two because both shvuas would be chal. And what's the reason for that? Kid Rava, it's like Rava says. The Amar Rava, because Rava said shvuah shelo ochel kikar zu. When he says shvuah shelo ochel kikar zu, kevan shachal mimena kazayis chayev. So there he's saying he won't eat even a kazayis of it. If he eats even a kazayis, he's going to be liable. And shelo ochalna, when he uses the word shelo ochalna, eino chayev ad sheyochel es kula. So there he's only chayev if he eats the entire thing. He eats the entire loaf. And that's why if you were to reverse the order, if he would say shvuah shelo ochalna, that would mean a shvuah that he's not going to eat the entire thing. Less than the entire thing would still not be a liability. And so then if you would then say shvuah shelo ochel, he actually would be adding something. He'd be saying that even if he just has a kazayis, he's going to be liable. And so the second shvuah would be chal because there is something to be chal on. He's adding something. But if it's, and that's why it would be chayiv too. But if it's in the other direction, the direction that the Mishnah says, that's where the Mishnah specifically makes sense. Because there, once he says shvuah shelo ochel, he's already forbidding for himself even a kazayis from this kikar. And so therefore, once that's the case, shvuah shelo ochalna is not adding anything, and that shvuah is not chal. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shvuah shelo ochalna v'achla. If he takes a shvuah again, it says a third time, he's not going to eat it, and then he eats it, eino chayev el achas, he's only chayev one. And so the Gemara asks on this, Hasu lamali, well, what's the point? Why do you have to say three times? You've already said the rule of ein shvuah chala al shvuah with just two cases. In other words, if the person says he's not going to eat, he's not going to eat two shvuos, so we understand the second one is not chal because ein shvuah chal al shvuah. Why does repeating it a third time, what does that add to our understanding of the Mishnah? And the Gemara says to that, Hakamash Malon, what the Mishnah is teaching us is as follows. Chiyuva hu deleka, there is no obligation in this case, because again, the second and the third shvuah have they're not chal, they don't take effect in terms of an obligation. However, hashvuah ika, however, the shvuah does remain in existence, meaning the imashkachas ravcha, that if some space is found, meaning to say, if for whatever reason the first shvuah does not take effect, so chayla, so then the subsequent shvuah would be able to take effect. It's not like that shvuah is nothing at all. That shvuah is there, it's latent, and if the earlier shvuah doesn't take effect, then the later shvuah will. The Gemara says, Lamai hal so what's the practical case over here for what is the halacha talking about? L'chid Rava, it's like for what Rava said. Diyamar Rava, because Rava said, in other words, how can you have that the first shvuah goes away? It's like Rava said, because Rava says, the imnishal al harishona, let's say he asks, you can undo a shvuah by asking a Talmud Chacham, by asking a court to undo the shvuah. So if he does do that, if he asks and undoes the first shvuah, also lo shniya tachteh, then the second one will take its place, and that's what the Mishnah is teaching us. And the Gemara continues, Lema Messiah, let's bring a support for this from the following brisa. Misha Nadar Beis Naziros. Let's say somebody makes a neder, two Naziruses. He says he's going to be a Nazir, and then he says he's going to be a Nazir again. Umon Rishona, what happens is he then counts the first Nazirus, V'hifresh Oleh Karban, and he separates a carbon in order to finish up that Nazirus. V'achar kach nishal al Rishona, and then he asks on that first one, undoes it. So also Lo Shniya B'Rishona, the second one actually counts with what he did the first time, that second Nazirus. he will have fulfilled it with that first Nazirus. That's what it says in the Braisa. And so it seems to be the same basic idea. That second one is latent, it is there, and if it needs to take the place of the first, it will. The same as we just said above by Shavuot. But the Gemara says, Hachi Hashta, what kind of comparison are we making? Hasam Nazirus Mia Isa, over there, the second Nazirus certainly exists. Techimani L'Rishona, if he would finish counting the first one, Boy Mahadir Mimna L'Shnia, below Sheila, he wouldn't need to count the second one, even if he didn't ask and undo the first. That second Nazirus is certainly a Nazirus. It's just a question of whether it was fulfilled through his keeping of the first Nazirus, or if he has to go ahead and do another Nazirus. So that's why over there it's latent and it's there. But over here, Shavuot Shnia, Mi Isa Klal, here that second Shavuot, does it exist at all? It does not exist. If he doesn't undo the first Shavuot, the second Shavuot is nothing, and so therefore you can't really compare the two cases. This case of Nazirus is not necessarily going to be a proof. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Nishba al kikor, let's say a person takes a shvua with regards to a loaf, v'achla, and he eats the loaf. Im shayir mimena kazayis, if a kazayis is still left, he did not eat the entire thing, so nishal oleh, then he is actually allowed to ask and undo that shvua. But achla kula, but if he ate the whole thing, it's too late. Ein nishal aleh, he can't ask, he cannot undo it. And the Gemara says, Amarle Ravacha braid the Rava Ravashi, Ravacha the son of Rava said to Ravashi, Hechi dami, what exactly is the case over here? Ida Amar shalo ochel, if he said shalo ochel, meaning to say he said he's not going to eat, and we interpret that as being he's not even going to eat a kazayas from the loaf. So mi kazayas kama of de lisura, he already transgressed from eating that first kazayas. It's all over. What difference does it make if he didn't finish the entire thing? And Idamar Shalo Chaln, if the way he phrased it was, I'm not going to eat it, meaning the entire thing. So my area kazayas, why does it say over here, why does Rava say that if a kazayas is remaining, why does it have to be a kazayas? Any amount is remaining, he still has not finished committing the Isser. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph.